Welcome everyone to the first Directions Mag Geospatial webinar of 2021, today sponsored by our friends at Nearmap. I am Barbara Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, joined by our assistant webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. If you have any questions about your connection, just drop us a note in the chat. We'll do our best to help you. We encourage you to read our feature articles and daily news. Stop by for more webinars, of course, at directionsmag.com. So today we are excited to have Charles Staton from Nearmap back with us, along with his colleague Brett Clark and their guest Lauri Sohl from the City of Sioux Falls. Welcome everyone. We are very excited to learn more about how we can incorporate imagery into our workflows and be smarter.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone, and thank you for having me back. Today is going to be a very good flow conversation. We're going to discuss some of Nearmap's contents and how it has helped Lauri and the City of Sioux Falls. And the title today is GIS and Aerial Data, Transforming Smart City Workflows in 2021 and Beyond. So we as a company, Nearmap is a world-leading imagery provider headquartered in Sydney, Australia around 2007. We have large integrating partners and customers, integrators such as Esri and Autodesk, and proudly subscribe and provide content for over 10,000 active customers. In March 2020, we are a Fast company named as one of the world's most 10 innovative enterprise companies, as well as being that gold partner with Esri to drive home that insanely easily integration adoption. What makes Nearmap different from other aerial imagery providers is, one, we have our own proprietary camera system, so it is different than a 5-camera standard array. It actually rotates on the bottom of the aircraft and captures images from each cardinal direction as well as each look angle of the camera. All of our imagery is going to be less than a year old. We fly in large metropolitan areas up to 3 times per year. And all of this imagery is going to be sub 3-inch resolution, so it is going to be very, very accurate as well as geo-referenced. All of our imagery is hosted inside of our web application that we call Map Browser. So it is cloud-based and doesn't need to take up storage on your machine. Since we have been flying the US in 2014, you're also going to be able to leverage all of our historical archived captures that have taken place across our US footprint. And we cover a lot of those high, dense metro urban areas that I mentioned earlier, and have over 65,000 square miles of available content derived from our imagery ready to go. Speaking of content, Nearmap has a diverse set of location content, and we'll get to those a little bit later, but just to gloss over them real quick, we have our 2.2 to 2.8 inch vertical imagery that we produce across the nation. As well as in large metro areas, we fly with a second camera system that is going to capture images from different look angles and cardinal directions. Those are known as our oblique and panorama. From that camera system, we create our first derivative product, which is going to be a 3-dimensional textured mesh for visualization. From that, we create other products like a digital surface model, digital elevation model, as well as a point cloud. And then I'm going to wrap up later on with Nearmap's latest innovation, our AI and ML feature attributes. And I'll get into those and some use cases in a little bit. So I'm going to pause here for our first poll question.
So we'd like to know, what is your most important or main use case for aerial imagery? Is that facilities and asset management, improving operational efficiency? Maybe you're improving coordination with field crews, site and resource planning, or some situational awareness. We know that maybe you would be able to pick more than one, but we want you to pick the one that is most important to you. So we'll give you just a couple more seconds here. Make those selections. And let's have a quick look. It looks like almost a tie between site and resource planning and facilities and asset management. Excellent. Good to know. Thanks for sharing, folks. So back over to you, Charles.
Thank you. Great question. So for now, especially on the site planning side, let's dive into this 2D imagery GIF that we're looking at now. So this is the framework for Nearmap's web application that we call Map Browser. From here, you can see at the bottom, it is changing from different aspects of view, from vertical to panorama, which are key in selecting sites using our proprietary camera system that produces those hard to see oblique images. So this allows you to sort of see around obstacles, whether you're dealing with dense vegetation or maybe in those urban canyons for planning and need to have a clear line of sight so that your planning and assets and resources can be allocated appropriately. So let's see a piece of this content in action. This is going to be the GIS City of Sioux Falls web app builder application. And here we've got Nearmap vertical imagery inside here. And this is going to allow the City of Sioux Falls and Lauri and her team to carry out their mission objectives that much more accurately. Lauri, if you want to discuss a little bit about what we're seeing here.
Sure. So the item here that is probably most impactful, especially for the GIS users on the call, is going to be that you'll notice on the left, yes, we're taking advantage of the Esri base maps. We do, however, here at the city, we do publish our base maps just a little bit differently for our users to ensure that they are using the base maps that we know contain the most up-to-date authoritative information for the City of Sioux Falls. And our imagery is no exception. So what we have here is an on-prem version of our Nearmap imagery that we have tiled and published to ARCGIS Online. And then I've created a web map with the imagery base map with the Nearmap imagery on top of it. And this is really important because this way I can share it with the public, anybody who uses any of our applications that are public facing at the City of Sioux Falls, including Parcel Finder, can take advantage of, in this case, imagery from August of 2020.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauri. And yes, while Nearmap is a cloud-based company, for these government customers, we do offer an on-prem or offline copy of tiles of any vintage that we have captured in your desired area or imagery to be captured in the future as well. So always know that that's an option because it's very important to governments like the City of Sioux Falls, as well as emergency responders to have inside of their third-party applications that might not be able to leverage web capabilities. So that's great. Thank you, Lauri. And now we're just going to touch on the Esri Community Apps Editor. And I believe Lauri and her team have been using this imagery to create a base map. And it looks like that the first step she's done here is sort of taken a background approach and digitized this school here. Is that correct, Lauri?
Well, in this particular frame here, so for those of you who contribute data to the Esri community base maps, we now have the ability to edit our campuses in a product called the Esri Community Apps Editor. And this allows us, especially on our schools, large campus schools, parks, and so on, to add more details and clarity of these features. So in this particular case, we can see that we have digitized the parking lot. We have digitized the football field of the USF Cougars in very high level of detail. As you can see, we've outlined the football field, the name at the end, and the mascot in the center, as well as the track and field and some other features on here. And we use the Nearmap because we have the most up-to-date imagery in order for us to be able to do this at this level of detail. And then in turn, when you go look at our topo-based map, once it gets published, you're going to see rich, highly detailed information for these sorts of features.
Awesome, thank you. So that high frequency available updates of the latest available imagery is really important into keeping these community maps up to date. And just like the City of Sioux Falls, other campus maps like Harvard University and Stanford also use Nearmap imagery for their base map reference, for their campus maps as well. Excellent. And now we're actually looking inside a GeoCortex Essentials. So once again, driving home that insane adaptability from using either a Nearmap web service to be integrated inside of the GeoCortex application and used as background and reference imagery for those design plans like this, Lauri. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So this is a product, like you mentioned, called GeoCortex Essentials. And while primarily we do use Esri products to make our front-facing web mapping applications, our utilities do require a few extra things. And one of those things is this ability to have access to a lot of different data layers in one place. And this product just really works well for us on that. And what is especially important is, again, the timeliness of having up-to-date imagery. So we incorporate that in here as well, and this is both public-facing. We also have a version of this application that is meant for our consultants. Exact same app, but it allows them to also download our vector layers that are contained in here too. So it serves two functions. And again, even though it's a different product, very easy to use, just like all Esri web mapping apps.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Now we're going to get through our first piece of derivative content that we're going to be able to create from the imagery. So I mentioned that proprietary camera system that produces the oblique images. With that camera system rotating from 0 to 45 degrees, captures anywhere between 40 to 60 different images for every single point on the ground. And also the flight pattern that Nearmap uses. So think about mowing the lawn back and forth. We're capturing all of these images from different cardinal directions as well as look angles. And we're able to piece those images together in an automated fashion to create this reality mesh, coming in at a 15 centimeter or 6-inch resolution. And here we've got, Lauri has created a web scene in ARCGIS, scene in an online environment where she can collaborate with her organization and coworkers and team members on their mission objectives using this reality mesh to provide context for her projects. So I'll let this play through and feel free to jump in anytime, Lauri.
Sure. So this is our first year having a 3D ortho mesh, and we've really been enjoying the possibilities that it is showing us. We find it to be incredibly responsive, very fast and easy to use. What we're seeing right now is a huge major bridge project on the northeast side of town. Seeing it in that angle is incredible. This is another side of town here on the northwest side where it is basically a university complex with a roundabout. So we really, really enjoy being able to see both sort of the skywalk walkway as well as, obviously the highly detailed pavement features of the roundabout.
Awesome.
I think it's coming up next to one of our new high schools that is under construction. I think it's a little bit farther along from where it is right here today, but this is from last August right here. It's always nice to be able to envision, what these projects are looking like, especially since obviously we can't get everywhere around town. And then I think my favorite one here is actually the first one that I showed, where it shows a building downtown that is very historic. It's called the Treasury Building, as well as to this image right here. This is a building right here called the Wedges, and so we thought this was of interest to show the different architectural styles that we have here in Sioux Falls for our commercial plazas as well.
Perfect, and I'll just go back to that very first historical capture right here.
Yeah, this one's pretty important to us. This is our River Greenway that goes through downtown. We've had a lot of activity and development along this greenway over the last probably 10, 15 years, but more so recently. This particular capture caught a bunch of things happening at once. The most important being the reconstruction of our 8th Street Bridge kind of on the left. And that project has since concluded, and it's just was such an amazing time to restore this historic bridge. But again, that beautiful Treasury building in the front, the modern, Hilton Garden Inn that you can kind of see in the background, kind of caught up in the middle of our river where our rails go through town. And it's a little bit of a mix of old and new.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauri. And remember, this is available in a variety of formats. What Lauri is using here is the Scene Layer Package, or SLPK format, that is ingestible by Esri Ecosystems. We also produce in other formats such as OBJ and FBX, which are widely accepted through the Autodesk suite. 3MX, which is compatible with Bentley systems, so Open Roads Designer, or anything like that, as well as a cesium. So if you're building a custom application and need to use some cesium mesh, we also offer that as a file type as well. And then we have a bit of a temporal timeline of a community development being built. And then Lauri also has her vector layers and parcels on top of this time lapse here through this neighborhood.
Yes, this one will look very familiar to those of us who use ArcMap and or ArcGIS Pro. In this particular case, I'm featuring ArcMap over time, and this is, I don't know if you guys can see it, kind of on the center top, you'll see the Nearmap toolbar, which is currently going forward a year of our imagery. And we did start obtaining our imagery here in the Sioux Falls area in 2016. So that is how far back we are able to go using basically our timeline tool.
Yep, absolutely. And that Nearmap timeline tool is a free download from the ArcGIS marketplace. It allows you to filter through historical vintages of Nearmap imagery inside of ArcMap. There is also time navigation possible through ArcGIS Pro as well as ArcGIS Online. So really having the ability to check those historical captures in any Esri suite really streamlines your workflow no matter where you are. Then we have our next to last integration method through ViewWorks, and there's a little Nearmap button there that serves as a keyhole into our web mapping application based on a lat-long view inside of ViewWorks, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is a product called DTS ViewWorks. I would say it's only been maybe a week or two. We did an upgrade on our ViewWorks software in our test environment, and basically it's pretty easy to access. So I just did a little sample here showing how you essentially hit the button in the ViewWorks software, and it basically brings up using the map browser application that Nearmap has, and it'll center it right on the same location.
Perfect. Yep, this is a really great use case for a reference layer. All right, and Esri's new flagship program for city planners and geographers alike is ArcGIS Urban, which is an online three-dimensional environment. And here we can see a hosted scene package layer inside of ArcGIS Urban, providing context to these extruded polygons for these townhomes inside of City of Sioux Falls ArcGIS Urban.
That's exactly right. And this scene in particular is really impactful because it's the development of a site that is in the core and that has not had any activity on it for a very long time. So as we start to explore what this neighborhood is going to look like over time, we'll be able to really see the impact. And as we add other features, right, vegetation, because as you can see, this is going to be in an area of very mature vegetation. Yeah, this is a great example of how we can add, kind of streetscaping to show how this will look like once it's fully built out. Now, we are pretty new to ArcGIS Urban. We just started implementing last year, and our goal is to make steps forward every year as we work with our planning department. This is in particular right here, this is an incredible development that's happening right now that has, it's been a pretty rugged industrial use with rail, but now it's converting into a more commercial use, and it'll match a lot of the other features that are around it. So we look forward to having this look like an actual, digital twin of what this is on the ground.
Yep, exactly. And ARCGIS Urban is a really powerful use case tool. You can even extrude polygons like Lauri has done here, or ingest Revit or BIM, highly accurate detailed architectural models inside of this application as well. And then Nearmap's content is always going to provide that 15-centimeter resolution context for visualization purposes, as well as community development, emergency response scenarios, calculating viewshed analyses, line of sight, as well as event planning. So these are just some of the use cases that Nearmap's textured mesh can really drive home the accuracy and the availability that we already have of different years, so that you can see the historical three-dimensional representations as well. All right, now I'm going to get into Nearmap's latest initiative, which is our artificial intelligence and machine learning feature extraction. So this goes through a short video here. I want to bring your attention to the data layers on the left-hand side of the screen. Everything that you see from tree overhang down to swimming pool, these are actually vectorized features inside of our map browser now. So these are live, and I can turn these on, and they are complete with metadata behind them, fully attributed. So we can see the amount of tree overhanging the roof. We can see the estimated area square footage of the solar panel, as well as this building footprint here. And these are actually exportable through our map browser or purchased in an offline format as a geo package. So these are actual points, lines, and polygons full of attributed data with our confidence level and an address locator. I'll show an example of that inside of ArcGIS Pro in a little bit, but just know these are available live right now. And we have done this for 2 vintages on our imagery, our fall 2019 capture, as well as our spring 2020 capture. And subsequently after that, Nearmap is going to run the AI on all of our captures so that customers and partners can be really across that change detection using this attributed data to get a deeper insight. So now I'm going to show what we call our beta layers. They're only called beta layers right now because we have not vectorized them yet. They exist in a single band raster format, so it has pixel values from 0 to 255, which are indicative of our confidence level of that particular attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and let this play, and I'm going to flip on a couple layers here over on the left-hand screen. The first one being asphalt. So what I'm going to get is this blue denotation of asphalt or roads throughout the area, as well as turning on things like concrete slab and driveway, which will be part of the same attribute. So we do get to that level of detail of, all right, is this an actual driveway? Is it next to a current existing asphalt layer, or is it just a concrete slab like the top of the building here? So we do separate those out, and you can kind of see the strength of each layer coming through. That's indicative, again, of our confidence level. So we can turn some other layers on to make that come through a little bit more and sharpen up that accuracy. So in the areas where a little bit of the yellow is being broken up by the concrete slab, we can validate that and turn off the AI layer to validate it with the imagery and say, yes, that is indeed a concrete slab. Nearmap is sure of that feature. So here's a quick example of our vector standard layers, as well as an example of our raster layers inside of ArcGIS Pro. You can see I have the main building footprint with roof characteristic highlighted in yellow, and then people's driveways highlighted as well in that bright white color. That would be a high pixel value of 255, and these darker areas, which are indicative of this is not a driveway, are going to be closer to a value of 0. So here's a great example of that attribute table that I was just mentioning earlier. So with the standard layers, an example like this building footprint, you're going to get the property ID, the survey date that this image was captured, the address, the lat long, our confidence percentage, the area square footage, the dominant roof material, and much more. So that's an example of the metadata that would come with all of our standard vectorized layers. And then here to wrap up, I want to highlight 2 different sets of features. They're going to be one, impervious surfaces. So I have the road and asphalt layer highlighted, as well as driveways and concrete slabs around this individual swimming pool here. I also have labeled in green lawn grass. So we do have a lawn grass layer. Right now it is still in a raster format, as well as the low vegetation. So these bushes and trees in this red color, and then trees over 6 feet or 2 meters highlighted in pink. So this is a great way to gain insights. And then just a little bit of a tidbit here, a bonus. These layers are taking priority to be vectorized since they are in such high demand. So I'll say that one more time, the impervious surface layers, asphalt, concrete slab, driveway, and our vegetation layers, lawn grass, low, medium, and high vegetation, are first to be prioritized to be in a vector format, and that will be coming out later this year. And I will pause there for our last poll question.
Very interesting stuff, Charles. Thanks so much. So what would be your main benefit in using AI? Maybe you'd like to save time, discover new feature locations, verify permit compliance, save costs purchasing data, or perhaps all of the above. If you can pick one, great. Perhaps all of those would tickle your fancy. Give folks just another moment. I think we've got some good information here. And we'll share those results. It looks like almost half would like all of the above. And then coming in at 33% save time manually digitizing. Very
Awesome.
good. Yeah, that's great information. So thank you for participating in our polls, folks. We always appreciate that. And now we are going to hand it over to Brett and Lauri. Welcome, Brett, and welcome back, Lauri.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you, Charles and Lauri, for filling us in on this great information so far. I want to take time just to have a more organic discussion between Lauri and myself, really taking a look at GIS, and it's really just more than maps. And we certainly have 2 topics listed here as far as leveraging imagery as an internal sales tool to promote GIS within local government. We'll talk more about that. Perhaps even if you're from a firm, an engineering firm or construction firm you've dialed in today, that's fantastic. We can also talk about how that would be beneficial internally there, but also talk about how imagery and GIS can be a universal language and how GIS can be used to cross-collaborate. I'd encourage everyone to please, if you have questions that you'd like to ask or items that you'd like us to discuss over the next bit, that would be fantastic. So, and we can certainly take those on. But Lauri, kind of going off script here a little bit, I was wondering if you could, I'm curious how you would have answered maybe pre-Nearmap that first question about what your main use for imagery would be there at the city.
That's a really good question. So here at the City of Sioux Falls, we have a rich tradition of using aerial photography and imagery. There is no doubt that when I first started here in the late 1990s, when we did our first ortho acquisition, that we had already had this usefulness with imagery with our contact prints that go back to the 1940s, actually. So since we started acquiring, ortho photography, it was like our world changed. But the most impactful part of this was cost and planning, budgeting. But then one thing we learned early on was there really was no way to ever have imagery that is current enough, right? That meets the needs of all of the users. And that's where Nearmap really helped fill that gap. For us, we get one flight a year, and we had a little bit of a say on when we wanted that flight to happen. We get our imagery in, give or take, early August. That depends on flight planning and such. But for us, that has been a game changer, because usually you can afford maybe one acquisition, every few years for most, governments of our size. And you're going to probably do it when the leaves are off too. So aesthetically, it may not be the most beautiful image for basically, here's how our city looks. It isn't always, shades of gray and brown like it is right now, this time of year.
Right.
So the big impact for us too was that August availability for us was huge for being at the end of our construction season. And I would say that combined with when construction projects are, maybe they're not done yet, but they're, pretty well along the line, having this imagery so regularly at a price point that is so reasonable to keep in our budget annually has probably been the biggest impact for us.
That's that's fantastic, and I love hearing that, obviously. But it's always interesting to me to hear that, because it's almost this, from a financial perspective, this difference between a CapEx and an OpEx expense. Being able to move that into more of just, yeah, we pay every year, but look at all the value that we're able to get. And we see that more and more as we talk about smart cities and what those workflows look like to empower that, and certainly more moving forward into the future. And it reminds me of an analogy that I've used before, that I've heard of, in regards to Nearmap, but certainly just in general where the GIS industry is going, and that's really with how we consume music. So way back in the day, all we could do was go and attend live events. Then we could finally record music on records. And so the golden age of vinyl, if you will, and then the Walkman came out, and we could use cassette tapes, for example. And then, I'm a little younger, I guess, but I remember the age of MP3s and CDs, and the having anti-skip technology and all that good stuff. And then the iPod came out, and the earth shook at its core, because wow, we could have 1,000 songs in our pocket. How amazing is this? We could buy a song on iTunes for 99 cents. But now we pay, $9.99 a month, and we have access to any song we want throughout the entire world, an unlimited number, right, through Apple Music. And I liken that to not only what we provide at Nearmap, but what we're seeing in GIS in general, which is this move away from kind of one-off projects that are very expensive, and more towards relying on data as a service or software as a service. So I'm curious if that analogy resonates with your experience, not just at the city and with Nearmap, but in general.
Definitely, especially when you look at, okay, so your music metaphor, right? You can access it from any device. So I think correlating that with how we utilize our Nearmap imagery, we have our desktop users, maybe they're CAD, GIS, other, but then we have our broad set of users that's accessing our imagery through ARCGIS Online and web applications and so on. But then I think the piece that really made imagery accessible for everyone with Nearmap was their map browser, because that allows a couple different types of uses that I don't know that even I realized. Number one, it's a quick place to look for information. I use it all the time for information. And I have, all these other tools at my fingertips as well. But then for those folks who are not GIS users, maybe they're, more at the leadership level. Maybe their job doesn't require them to use GIS terribly often, but they do need access to up-to-date imagery to verify maybe a project plan quickly. For me, that's been the biggest transition. Was it brought imagery to everyone. And what I find really, really great. So at the beginning of August, I learned that I'm not the only one who is, kind of keeping an eye on that acquisition date to see when it's going to roll over. Some of our users who are most excited are our, non-traditional GIS users who are using Map Browser. They're looking for that date to change. We don't wait for the email that says your capture date has been updated, right? We know the minute it happens, I think, because we're all refreshing our screens trying to catch that.
That's fantastic, though. I mean, it kind of goes into that secondary bullet point we have on the screen here around being a universal language. Not a lot of people, relatively speaking, in local government are GIS experts like yourself. Many of them are, let's say public works employees, call takers at a dispatch center, they're on the engineering staff or other things. Have you seen using imagery become truly that universal language because it's something everyone can understand versus, parcel information or GIS layers, things like that?
No doubt. And to that point of being a universal language, the integrations we have, some of them are very subtle, right? It doesn't even appear to be a true integration. But when we look at, obviously the GIS software using it, but we have all these other packages and business systems that are using it as well. Our permitting and inspection system is using this imagery. Our public safety software CAD client is using this imagery. It is as if when we're making these decisions, to renew or to go forward or to try something new that Nearmap is offering, like the AI and machine learning products, it's really not a matter of even having to convince anyone. If we feel strongly that, hey, it's time for us to take a look at this and see if we can find it useful. It's very rare for us to say it's not useful. We might say, it's getting there, maybe next year. But for the most part, we are finding that the way we do business, no matter what, at its base is using imagery.
Yeah, it's that core language. Those are fantastic comments, because we're in the conversations we have, we're seeing more and more. Smart city is a buzzword, right? And a lot of people use that, but people are starting to really think, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be a smart city? And in our line of work within aerial imagery and geospatial data, we often get asked, accuracy or a lot of these details and camera specs and things like that. And it really comes down to, the definition of a smart city really, I think, in my opinion, comes from how good your data is. And data quality and accuracy can really mean a couple different things, whether you purely look at the spatial accuracy or the resolution, or in our case, the argument we make is the temporal nature of that. How old is an image, right? It can be great that you have 1 inch accuracy, plus or minus. But if the image is 4 years old in a growing city like Sioux Falls, is that really accurate? Is it really indicative of what is actually out on the ground? And so we're finding that whether your use case is for assessment, whether it's to do address points for 911, to do project management, if you're trying to find out, what's the degradation of the asphalt throughout your city, that imagery, you're absolutely right, becomes that universal language. Touching on the primary point there about leveraging imagery as an internal sales tool, and I'll put that in quotes. I'm curious to get your take on this in your experience, Lauri. Oftentimes when we engage with the GIS staff, there's this hesitation almost to share Nearmap, for example, because we say, you know, are you working with public safety? Well, no, we're not. Or are you working with public works? No, we're not. And so there's this reticence to get in front of those groups because they've been shot down in the past or what have you. So I'm curious, how has imagery changed your ability to really, you know, quote unquote, sell GIS to other, not only, you know, other divisions within your city, but even other, you know, participating agencies in your local community?
That's a real good question. We work with all departments here in the city and their, you know, divisions and subdivisions. And so we have been really lucky over the years in that, you know, we have a reputation as, you know, kind of being a bridge builder, right? You may or may not know that we have a solution. We may not know that we have a solution, but once we understand sort of the problem or the project, we're usually able to, you know, bring forth items that are incredibly helpful. The public safety side is one area that we did make, you know, some real good headway in with the Nearmap imagery, especially on the police side. Police departments tend, obviously, to keep their data, you know, pretty close to the vest, shared very carefully, and that is something that has been, you know, not really a hurdle for us, but just a way of doing business and the ability for us to kind of strengthen our relationship with police, and then further our relationship with our fire group, which is an incredible user of ours. It really it's helped us take it the next step. Our imagery is even used in our, you know, to provide clarity in our sex offender mapping applications regarding where can a sex offender live relative to something else. It provides context as to what that really means, you know, not just a parcel outline on a vector-based map. And I think really just this ability for anyone has access to this now. You don't need to have, you know, a master's degree in geography to use this.
Thank goodness.
And you can still get such incredibly high value, you know, with a map browser, for example. So there is there's a flavor for everyone with the way that we have shared it throughout our organization, and also with our partner agencies that we work with, our county, our state, and so on.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's amazing to hear that happening, especially at a city the size of Sioux Falls, you know, a good sized city. And it's great to hear that your department is that bridge building. It's not always the case. Be it large or small cities, we often find that different departments are working in silos. They don't know what the other is doing, and so the real concept that we see coming through is that because imagery is a universal language, you know, a trash collector, a GIS professional, and a code enforcement officer can look at a picture and they all kind of get it, right? Versus that vector map that you were talking about with a bunch of polygons. It's a lot more relatable. So that's fantastic insight. And that's, if I can kind of sum this up before we close this bit of the webinar and move on to the wrapping up and Q&A. It's something where we see the smart city going. Again, going back to what I mentioned about you're only as good as your data. It's crucial to have that timely, accurate, high quality information to really bring people together and transform the way you currently do your workflows. One of my least favorite sayings that literally turns my stomach is, well, that's just the way we've always done it. Well, that's not transforming anything. That's standing still. And one of the things my father taught me is to never stand on the moving sidewalk, Brett. That's not what it's meant for. And I've always taken that to heart, that when I see a moving sidewalk, it's meant to accelerate my pace forward. And that's definitely what we have seen, and hopefully everyone on this webinar has seen, with what we at Nearmap are doing, what Lauri and her staff in the City of Sioux Falls have been able to do, is really move forward to transform their workflows to truly become a smart city in so many different aspects. And we hope that this part of the webinar and discussion has been beneficial. Before we go to Q&A, Lauri, any closing thoughts on these topics?
I think the one thing that you just made me think of, and I'm sure this person who might be listening today too will remember this, but I'll never forget when I first saw an ad for Nearmap and looking into it and then finding out that imagery as a service, well, isn't that interesting? And just thinking, well, let's just give it a whirl, right? Let's just see if this is something we like. If we don't like it, we don't have to renew it. And I look back now, and I don't even think we realized back then how this would become such an impactful offering for all of us. Anybody who uses our products, internal employees. It's just like anybody who touches any of our spatial location-based items is able to take advantage of this. And it was a transformation.
That's fantastic. I love hearing that. You gave me goosebumps. And it's good to hear that the marketing machine is working. but no, I appreciate that very much. It's always great to hear those, and we certainly look forward to more great things coming out from you and your team on how that's transforming your workflows and continuing to deliver on that promise to be a smart city. So with that, thank you, everyone. I want to turn it over to Q&A.
Thanks, Brett. So Lauri, as long as we've got you there, we have a question for you. Does the City of Sioux Falls have an ELI with Esri? It seems that you have been using many different Esri apps. And so someone is curious about how you make that happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, we have what is called a small government enterprise agreement. And it does take into account, a lot of what you mentioned. Licensing for Enterprise Portal, ARCGIS Online, ARCGIS Pro licenses, ArcMap licenses, and so on. But there are some items that are still above and beyond that. So for example, ARCGIS Urban, has a separate line item for us. Previously, we did have, I don't know, for those of you who might remember, we had what was previously called a negotiated enterprise agreement. And it just didn't quite work for us. At the time, Esri didn't offer sort of this package the way they do now. I think, if I remember right, the reason we didn't do a government EA originally was because maybe the small government was too small for us, at a reasonable price point. And I think the population for the next tier was pretty large. And I think we felt that, we're not Los Angeles. I don't want to have to pay that. And holy cow, how am I going to get that through the budget process? So for us, small government EA gives us that ability to have a standardized, expectation of what we're going to owe every year for these products, and we don't feel near as limited. Like we don't have to limit licenses and so on and things like that. So yeah, having that has made the management, I would say, of the sort of back end of GIS, all of our licensing and tools, so much easier and more cost effective as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So Charles, over to you. A number of questions have come in about accuracy and how often we can get data and information. So let's start with what is the horizontal and vertical accuracy of the vertical and oblique data sets? Sure.
So with our oblique imagery, that's captured with our latest camera system that we call HyperCamera 2, which produces a 2.2-inch vertical and oblique. And the horizontal accuracy is 28 centimeters, 28, and the vertical accuracy is 40 centimeters, 40.
Perfect.
Great question.
And do you have the capability to fly immediately after disasters to allow comparison for before and after?
Yes, we do have a post-catastrophe program that we can get into later in an offline discussion.
Okay.
It's too in-depth for here, but yes, we do have the ability, and we do have a post-cat program.
And you mentioned that there were 3 captures per year for most metro areas in the U.S. Someone wants to know what seasons those typically happen in.
Yeah, we really try to give the breadth of all imagery from each season for every metro region that we are able to do that for. It's a little bit harder in those northern regions when snow stays on the ground for a while. And then, you know, in areas like Texas, we try to fly throughout the year, and then as well as as close to the end of the year as possible in December, so they can have optimal leaf off conditions. So we really try to give everybody the availability of all seasons.
Awesome. And I know this is something that Lauri touched on as well, talking about watching for the update. How often can folks download the data that is updated?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I saw this question. If you have maybe a connection to our tiled service, which is in the Esri marketplace, so you can integrate and add from ARCGIS Online a tiled service connection into your ArcMap, ArcGIS Pro, or even ArcGIS Online instance. And as long as that marketplace item stays active inside of your table of contents, every time we fly, that area will be updated inside of your ArcGIS application. Also, if you have a WMS service also integrated into any of those ecosystems, the newest and latest imagery will pop down at the bottom every time that we fly. You can monitor it by our web application. Map Browser also has a location pin where you can add a location to your watch list, and you will actually be notified by email when new imagery has been published to your specific area. And a lot of times that's going to be, you know, 3 times per year, sort of in the, you know, April to May, February timeframe, and then the summer months, and then could be August through December in some cases as well. So yeah, that's a great question.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Someone would like to know how the area of the roof is accounted.
So for things like area and slope, things like that have sort of some relief, we use a conjunction of our vertical imagery as well as our oblique imagery to calculate the areas of roofs, and all of it's done via our processing pipeline. So we have a patented camera system as well as the automated processing pipeline. So all of the measurements are accurately recorded once that stitching takes place. So georeferencing, you can even test it in Map Browser to go through a quick 2-step process where you measure an area once in the oblique image, and then the next step is to bring those tie points back to their origin in the ortho image. So you're doing a bit of an ortho rectification process, very simplified on our web application to get an accurate area and slope measurement.
Excellent. I know that's great news for a lot of folks. So we have talked about compatibility with many different things. I know in some of these examples, lots of flexibility that people have. Someone in particular asked about open source, QGIS. Maybe you could address how that is integrating with things you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we love QGIS. Actually, it's a great free application. And we actually have instructions on our in-depth doc page using QGIS to vectorize our AI data. So static vertical imagery, so an offline copy of imagery or a WMS service can be integrated both into QGIS very easily, as well as viewing derivative products like our DSM, which is going to be our digital surface model or digital elevation model inside of QGIS and then creating things like contours off that to create a bare earth or topography scenario. QGIS is a great tool, and it's very powerful when leveraging our imagery and then some of those other 2D derivative products.
Excellent. Lauri, we are going to hop back to you for a moment here. Someone would like to know how you integrate Nearmap into Web App Builder.
Sure. No, that's a great question. So the way we integrated it in Web App Builder is Nearmap does allow government government entities to purchase an on-prem version. So what I basically did was I purchase on-prem versions every year as well, and I think I recommend that just as a data to all the data stewards on the call. But then what I did was I created a hosted tile layer, and I actually have it available in our shared base maps. So think of it like the imagery base map as it is right now, where it's consuming, the big massive imagery base map layer with the Nearmap imagery on top. That being said, there's other ways of sharing this as well, depending if it's internal or external. But for me, this was one way of doing it, just in the base maps, right? Everybody uses the base maps, internal users, external users. I was able to provide this for so many people with literally, a base map, right? So that would probably be the way I would recommend for others too. It was very easy to do, and it is seamless and fast. You would not know you would not know what I've done, right, until you get to the edge of the city acquisition area.
Perfect. And Brett, over to you. Someone would like to know how you manage privacy with the visual images of private property.
Sure. So there's lots of regulations around privacy. A general rule of thumb is that if you're able to determine gender, for example, from an aerial image, that's typically out of bounds, basically. With that. With all of our flights, we do not deploy drones or satellites. We purely use fixed-wing manned aircraft. And so we're completely FAA compliant with all of our camera specs and data being managed that way. And so we're able to be well within the lines of privacy concerns that anyone might have. While it is certainly a very high resolution, it's nothing compared to a drone floating just a few yards above your home, or certainly even with street view imagery. There's a lot of different providers out there, and I think I saw a similar question asking about how we stack up against more frequently updated satellite imagery, for example. With all the different imagery types, there's different benefits and drawbacks. Satellites will show you everything, and in the case of, for example, Planet, they can update every day or give you a live video feed, which seems excessive. But the resolution is federally mandated to not exceed a 1-foot resolution, which is quite granular. Drones are heavily regulated because of privacy concerns. And so while they can get really great resolution, you're very limited on coverage. And so we feel we have a bit of a Goldilocks solution in that we can fly hundreds and thousands of square miles and provide great coverage and great resolution, but not falling outside of the, getting into the drawbacks of satellites or drones. And so in that aspect, we're able to remain within compliance of the regulations that are out there for aerial imagery and privacy.
Excellent. And Charles, one last question, because we are just about out of time.
Sure.
Folks, of course, would like to know how they can learn more. Are there available tutorials to show folks how to make these things work?
Absolutely. So we have an extensive documentation page as well as blogs that myself and my team contribute to and publish often throughout the year. And as new third-party applications come into play, we always want to have some really good tutorials and walkthroughs on how to integrate Nearmap content. And that website is going to be docs.nearmap.com. And that is what we call our knowledge hub, which is a fully searchable, encapsulated document that teaches you step-by-step instructions on how to integrate all different types of 2D, 3D, and AI content from Nearmap into third-party applications that you're familiar with, or even some custom applications that you might be building with your developers. Great question.
Awesome. Well, we'll drop that link in the chat here for everyone. So thank you to our audience for attending today's webinar. We always appreciate you being here in person. Remember that the recording will be archived, and you can check out an email that has a link to view the webinar on demand, along with your attendance certificate, resource links, and of course those handouts. There's still a second or two to download those. We appreciate you completing the brief survey on the way out. Thank you again to Charles, Brett, and Lauri for sharing their expertise, and also to Elsa for her help with logistics. We hope that you will make it a great day. Tell a friend about Nearmap and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everybody.